Well, hello and welcome to our continuing Bible devotional. We're continuing in the book of Ephesians, and today we're at Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, which say this: Therefore, remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands, remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Now, there's some terms and phrases and ideas that you might not be familiar with here, and I don't have time to go into all of them because he's using phrases that refer back to the promises given to the Jewish people in the Old Testament, the Abrahamic covenant, and things of that nature, which is what he refers to when he talks about covenants of promise and the commonwealth of Israel and so forth. But rather than getting kind of distracted by secondary issues, I want to focus on the major idea here. And the major idea here is that every Christian needs to remember their lives before Christ, their BC life before Christ. That, so that you appreciate what you have now and stick with it. He instructs us in verse 12, remember, you Gentiles, you people who come into this new relationship with God through Jesus, remember what you were. Remember what your old life was. Why does he give us this command? Well, I think there's just something about human nature that makes us have a tendency to forget how empty and how foolish and how painful our past lives were. You can even see this in non-spiritual things. People may match out their credit cards, spend years of struggle paying them off with all the high interest, dealing with creditors, filing bankruptcy maybe, and they may say to themselves, never again. But down the road, they fail to remember. They forget, and they go right back to that same behavior and experience the same negative consequences. Well, the same thing can happen spiritually. People forget what their old life was like without Christ. And when they forget and when they don't recall, they have a tendency to slip back into some old behaviors, some old thinking, some old activities that end up being destructive. So Paul tells us every Christian needs to remember their life BC, their life before Christ. We need to remember the joylessness, the emptiness, the struggles, the bondages, the dead end, and the ultimate destiny of life without Jesus. As it says here in verse 12, at that time you were separated from Christ. You were strangers in covenants to the promise. You had no hope. You were without God. You were without God and without access to his precious promises in the world. So don't forget what it was like, to not have Jesus, to not be walking with him. In my BC life, I did not have Jesus to strengthen me when I was weak. I did not have Jesus to comfort me when I was hurting. I did not have Jesus to guide me when I was lost. I did not have Jesus, and because I did not have Jesus, I did not have the promises of God, the promise of eternal life, the promise of him sovereignly working all things for good, the promise of the greatest reunion, family reunion, friend reunion ever. All of that was my life before Jesus Christ. I was truly without hope and without God in the world, and I don't ever want to go back to that. And one of the essentials to stay in the course, not giving up, is just continuing to remember your life BC, your life before Christ. I trust that you will do that. Have a blessed day.